Anah's Labyrinth. If you're a first-time visitor, I hope you'll enjoy the content and stay. I do recommend that you go back and take a look at the other content before you start here, because it all has a natural flow to it. If you're a returning visitor, thank you very much. I'm glad to see you again. I'm happy that the content that I'm giving you is something you consider to be useful. So, as promised, today we're looking at number 9. And its influences on the personality or the individual. And we'll be looking at the absent, of course, the isolated numbers and multiple numbers on the birth chart. And so before we go any further, let's just crack on and take a look at it. So the number 9 in itself, when people are living creatively and positively, it represents the mind in responsible action. That is the thinking, the ambition on the earthly and physical plane. And it's combined, of course, with the spiritual aspects of feelings and emotions. It carries all the aspects of all the other numbers. So it's considered to be an active and spiritual number, one that combines, just to reiterate, thinking, ambition, and idealism. It can actually be associated with being a bit of a zealot, actually. But back to this now. It represents putting thoughts into action. It's about putting these ideas and principles that we believe to be humanitarian, the greater good of humanity, the collective, the brother and sisterhood, to put those ideas into a physical activity that is also responsible. It does also, on occasion, represent the capacity to be able to do prophecy, and that is to channel information for the greater good of humanity. There is a problem with the number 9 if it's a singular number on the birth chart, and this is where the ideas of righteousness, shall we say, can be problematic, and this sense of zealism of what other people should and shouldn't be doing can be problematic. And it represents, of course, it's referred to as the number of the warrior, and this is why it can give some insight into what happened throughout the world through the 1900s, of course, because you've had more than one 9 on the birth chart. So it is, the power of the idealist with the ambition. So during the 21st century, we're seeing a transition from ego and ambition and materialism, because obviously material greed was a really big issue throughout the 20th century, where we saw these wars happening for land. And at the end of the day, we know that money was behind all of these wars, land, status, all ambitious and egotistical, really, at the end of the day. Anyway, we see a shift from this into the 21st century, and it has started. It started a little bit erratically from what we can see. Money is still a really big thing. Ego is still a really big thing. We're in the early part of the 21st century. So it's going to be a shift over the next 100 years, more and more towards the end of this century. What else can I say about it? The 9 does carry the responsibilities with it as well, and it needs to be, if people have got a single 9 on their chart, they need to express a balance over the mind, body and spirit, more so than for people that don't have a 9 on their chart. But we'll talk about absent 9s in a little while. It's when there is an imbalance that this fanatical behaviour occurs, and it's a form of compensation, if you like, for errors and omissions of the past. Okay, the singular 9 basically carries the message of moderation in all things. And I think for the 21st century, what we're seeing here is that there is a focus on the birth charts. If you've been looking at the birth charts that I've put up, there's basically entire missing numbers missing on the mind plane. And that, of course, we know doesn't mean that a person is incapable of thinking. What it means is that they struggle to balance, and they tend to be more emotionally reactive. They tend to be more impulsive. They don't necessarily process problems through to completion. But for the 1-9, let's just get back to that. What we're seeing here is that they need to make a concerted effort to be moderate in all the things that they do and retain a balance across the mind, spirit and body. planes. So for people with 2 nines on their birth chart, there is an intensity of this idealism and zeal for them, and this is combined with overthinking, okay, a bit over analytical. So they must be really careful to practice this balance that we did refer to before. They can be inclined, in fact, let's say, not necessarily they are inclined to be very critical of other people that have got lower levels of idealism, and they would be advised to guard against this kind of thinking and behaviour, because this leads to judgmentalism and is going to impact negatively on their relationships with other people. And of course, that has the spin off effect that it's going to impact on their capacity to enjoy and feel happiness in their lives. They're very deep thinkers, and they're, to their credit, their underlying intent is actually to be helpful. So they need to learn to clearly express this helpfulness, but at the same time not take it for granted. So they might want to put boundaries and limits on their own behaviours, recognise that when their generosity is being exploited so that it doesn't occur, and just appreciate actually what their gifts are and moderate them. So where there's 3 nines on the birth chart, I do a big sigh with this, okay, it can be problematic for them. The power of the idealism combined with the zealotism and the power and all the rest of it can be particularly difficult for these people to handle, and it can produce levels of psychological and emotional instability for the people that don't recognize their own power. It's not uncommon for people with this combination to let their mind magnify the problems that they're experiencing, or to exaggerate them out of all proportion. And in fact, this is where I refer to the tunnel vision, where they just can't see other options that are available to them. And it can be very difficult for their loved ones to shift their vision away from the problems and onto solutions or onto gratitude. Anyway, it can often result in this mood instability, a lack of emotional control, along with outbursts and tantrums. And to address this, they need to open their mind a little to allow themselves to accept these small variations from their rigid idealistic constructs. I would imagine that 3 nines is probably more frustrating for people that have got the arrow of frustrations to start with, or even the arrow of the intellect, one of the logical, rational type arrows on the chart. That's going to influence as well. And just a reminder here too that when we've got 3 nines on the birth chart, that might actually be balanced out. This mood instability may be balanced out if there is perhaps one of the more peaceful, rational, calming type signs. Perhaps, what are the water signs? So Scorpios and Cancers can be very emotionally sensitive. So I don't know, perhaps one of the air signs such as Gemini or Virgo might have a calming influence for the people with 3 nines. The 4 nines is actually a very rare combination. Probably the only times we will see 4 nines on a birth chart is for people, say, born in 1999 or when we get to 2099, because of course the only ways that you can get it is to have it on the 9th or the 19th of September or the 29th of September, something like that. It would have to be in the September months to be able to get the 4 nines on the chart. So anyway, it's a rare combination, and when it does arrive, and we will be witnessing the tail end of this throughout the next century, because there will have been people born in September 1999 who are alive today and will be alive for a while. It's got 2 distinct personality types. There's those people that lean towards having this happy outlook or hippie outlook on life, and they have this heightened sense of idealism that can lend itself to being a little bit vague around the reality of life. They might be perceived to be a bit ungrounded. They might be the type of person that wants to drop off the radar or the grid for weeks and months on end. They're harmless enough. They don't respond well to guidance because they perceive that their approach to life is what's normal and what's acceptable. And then, of course, you've got the other spectrum, the polar opposite, which of course is the righteous person. They tend to be more aggressive, they can be quite belligerent, they can take pleasure in belittling other people who challenge their views and opinions or fail in some way to meet their views of what's right and what's wrong. They tend to need a lot of support to manage their emotions and attitudes, to avoid harming themselves or other people, and they can often experience isolation and loneliness due to the desire by them to have a distance, by the other people around them, to have a safe distance from them, because they can actually be quite volatile and hostile when they're enraged. So I guess for those people who are parents of these types of children, it's a little bit late in the day now. Those young ones would be the adults of about 24, 25 now. So they're going to have to learn to find a balance as mature adults now and work towards having this balance and developing a more practical approach to life, I would imagine, and to their social interactions. And I would say release judgment as well. So an isolated 9 occurs when there's no number 5, 6 or 8 on the birth chart. You can see here there's a gap there. So the 9 sits out there like a little island all on its own. These people can experience impractical idealism and even unrequited ambition, or both, right? A single 9 usually indicates this lack of fulfillment around their work and ambition. And if there's a double 9 in there that's absent, isolated, then that just intensifies this lack of fulfillment. And of course, the more 9s that you've got isolated, then you can pretty well guarantee that they will experience both these impractical ideals of what we all should be doing, and at the same time an inability to fulfill their ambitions. And to counteract these tendencies, they would be well advised, if they haven't learned it in their younger years, to be working on it as an adult, to focus on developing their communication and their personal expression. And by that we mean talking about their feelings and emotions, I would say in a safe space. I think we see an overabundance of this happening in a public forum on social media. And from my perspective, based on my mental health training, it would be find a safe space to have those outlets, learn to express in a safe way about feelings or expectations to others before you go public. And part of their development would include understanding and holding compassion for the people around them. That might be a bit challenging for them, but as they work through these challenges, of course, they're going to develop the skills to be able to lead a more rewarding and fulfilling life, including fulfillment within the work situation. So the absent 9 on the chart is actually really interesting because, as said before, anybody that was born in the 1900s is going to have a 9 on the chart. But those people that are born in the 21st century, there's going to be an increasing lack of a 9 on the chart, and it's going to be far more observable by the time we reach, say, 2040, 2050. It's going to be a lot more obvious. These people don't have the same egocentricity or ambitiousness as people with the 9, generally speaking, of course. Where there is an absence, there is this potential for mature and responsible decision making for the greater good of all humanity. Now, I think just based on my own observations and awareness, at the moment what we're seeing is the start of it, where these young people that have been born in the 21st century, they're now young adults. The life path is one of growth and development, and what we see currently is that they haven't reached that emotional maturity yet. A lot of them, I'm not talking about all of them, but by the 2040, 2050, they will have matured. They will be able to use their gifts, if you like, and their idealism and their personal values in responsible ways for the greater good of humanity. And this is why the absent 9 actually bodes well for the future of everybody. Princess Catherine, I decided to do her birth chart today and take a closer look at it because we've looked at her children's, and I thought it just would be interesting as an exercise and activity to do. And in fact, actually, I believe I'm quite right. First of all, her birthday is the 9th of January 1982, so her sun sign is that of the Capricorn, which is very earthy, very practical. Capricorns tend to, as a rule, basically deny anything to do with the spiritual until such a time as they're forced to face it, and it can create, this is based on my experiences, it can be actually quite uncomfortable for them as they make this transition, stepping away from the logical and practical and into this whole opening and awareness that there's more to life than just the earthly pursuits. But either way, when we look at her chart, we see, and her ruling number is a 9. The ruling number of 9, whilst it can be expansive and it's often associated with people that are visionaries, like if we were going to say prophets or whatever. But when it's in the negative, it can be actually quite tunneled and focused vision, such as if they develop depression or anxiety conditions. It can be very difficult for those people around them to get them to shift their gaze once again on the positive. Now, this actually might be a problem with Catherine. I'm actually speculating at the moment because of her health conditions and because this year she's been absent a lot. And of course, we don't know what her health issues are. But the other thing is too that I have noticed links myself with people and their ruling numbers. Actually, I made a mistake there. The day number is a 9 for Catherine, not the ruling number. Her ruling number is the 3. So that still applies for the 9 that I mentioned about this tunnel vision type focus. But that's the secondary path for Catherine. It's not the primary path. Her primary pathway is not about visions and that kind of thing, although it will rear its head. Just to make it clear to you, we have a secondary path. So the primary path is the one that we tend to walk in our daily life, but we still bring in aspects of that secondary path, which for her is the 9. But her primary pathway is that of the ruling number of 3. Now, interestingly, while 3 is a great number, and I have mentioned this to many people, the 3s, they're just jovial, they're just great fun to be around. I've known them quite closely, and at the same time there is a sensitivity that's involved with them. They love to please, they love to make their loved ones happy, and they will walk on water to make them happy if they feel that will basically, I wouldn't say a people pleaser, I would just say that they will always say yes. So in some ways they're a bit of a yes person, but they do so jovially. But where it becomes problematic is when they say yes to things they really don't want to do. And then the problems that I've seen is that perhaps their partner or loved ones realise that they don't want to do it, but they get a bit of a laugh out of asking them to do things that they know they don't want to do because that's proof that they're loved or whatever. I'm talking about in intimate partnered relationships. Anyway, what will end up happening is ultimately the 3 does a great big tanty, if you like, and just sort of like, I don't want to do it, it's not fair. It just creates conflict to take advantage of their generosity is where I'm going. But the other thing that I've actually identified with the 3 is that perhaps because they are so eager to please and make people happy, that I associate it with a great level of kindness, and this kindness can be exploited and taken advantage of. And when I was working in the psychiatric facilities, I did this informal research, if you like, and I established that it proved a theory for me that a lot of the people with a ruling 3, they end up in psychiatric facilities having had a form of breakdown because of one reason or another. They've been taken advantage of. So for Catherine, I would be saying, just be mindful of those boundaries. Keep your boundaries in place, because that's so important. It's important to know your limitations and not go beyond them, and to be able to stand up and say no. We all know that she's got a competitive side to her and she's quite funny. But okay, let's take a look at her birth chart now, because it is interesting. The reason why I say it's interesting is because you see a lot of absent numbers here. Now, as what's his name? Dr. Phillips said, it is not, when we look at the birth chart, The absences don't reflect a lack of character or anything like that. What they reflect is the challenges a person is going to have to face. And Catherine actually has a lot of gaps on her chart. She's got a missing 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to unpack these on this chart. The missing 3 basically says that she's got a potential to succumb to laziness and indifference, and she'll need to take greater effort to ensure that she exerts on the mental plane. And this, of course, is especially the case if her ruling number is not a mind number, which if we look at the birth chart, we see that actually her ruling number is that of a 3. It is on the mind plane. So she's not going to need to take as much effort as other people where there's a missing 3, right? That combats some of that laziness or indifference. But she would still need to work it a little bit, just not as hard as other people. She'll need to be a bit self-disciplined and to keep her mind busy and alert. But at the same time, where it comes to that as a guide normally for a 3, I would say the very fact that her birth chart is loaded, with the mind plane saying a number 9, that's going to compensate somewhat for that as well. So when we look at the spiritual plane, we see there's a missing 4. So let's just go straight down to that. The missing 4, that reflects impatience. That's going to be interesting because Catherine's got 2 arrows. Maybe I should speak to those first. Okay, the arrows are, the arrow of frustration is the one that runs vertically through the chart. She's missing the 4, 5, and what's the other one? 6, 4, 5, and 6. So that's the arrow of frustrations. It keeps coming up. It's this release expectation. The guidance of this is release expectation upon other people, because it will invariably lead to disappointment and frustration and emotional conflict for the person. So it becomes a case of hold your values tight to your heart. They're your values. Recognize everybody's an individual. We don't all share the same values and beliefs. And don't expect too much of people. Right? Just appreciate who they are, the ones that you find on your journey that resonate with you and share morals and values and beliefs. They're the important people to hold on to, and to let them know that you value them and appreciate them. As for the rest of them, just accept them for who and what they are, and you determine based on your own levels of boundaries whether or not to let them close or whether or not we keep them on the peripherals. It doesn't need to be a great big dramatic scenario. The other arrow, of course, is the arrow of the intellectual, and this is the one that runs diagonally across the chart. And this one basically says that she's a questioner. She's not going to take something at face value. If somebody turns around and says to her, this is what it is, she will want to know proof, okay? And that will be this desire for proof and evidence and factual type information is going to be magnified because she's an earth sign. She's that Capricorn. She is not going to be into stuff unless she actually is able to get the evidence for herself. So that's just part of that. So now let's go back to the 4, the missing 4. The missing 4 reflects impatience, which I find interesting because this impatience is going to be compounded by the fact that she's got the 2 arrows. Her impatience will largely be directed at people that swallow information without asking questions, which is probably the public for her, and the gossip mags where people read stuff in the media or whatever and they believe it and they come to conclusions. She would be deeply frustrated by that. That would just irritate the living tar out of her. The other thing is that because she's got the arrow of frustrations, she would be deeply disappointed by people that just take this information without using their God-given grey matter, okay? So that's what the missing 4 means. In fact, it probably would create hell on earth for her until she learns to manage it. Okay, so therein lies the next thing, creative release. She's missing a 6. So the 6 is very important for her because it's a part of the very fact that it's absent. It means that she's got to find a creative outlet as part of releasing pent-up emotions. And this needs to be usually a physical activity. It can be the arts, it can be gardening, probably what Prince Charles does. At the same time, music is considered an artistic endeavour. So as part of her good health and well-being, I would imagine she needs to set special time aside to be able to do her music, which I think is playing the piano, something like that. That needs to be incorporated as part of her routine. The missing 7 is an indication that she's not expected to experience a lot of loss in this lifetime, but at the same time, she may need to build on empathy. Look, it's very easy for us to say we see on the media that she's empathetic, but she may be working towards empathy and striving. That might be part of her putting the effort across the life path to develop these attributes, because where there's a missing 7, it's just not generally natural fallback behaviour. And, for example, we can see this actually in her life path. There hasn't been a broken family, for instance. Her parents have remained married. They're still married. They're very supportive of her. She's got family members that are present. However, her parents have, now that she is a mature adult, they've now apparently lost their business, or it's gone into administration or something like that. So she may be impacted to an extent by her parents' loss, but she hasn't actually gone through that loss herself. So we see here the influences of the 7. So I hope that's given you an example of how we unpack a chart. So, my friends, that's it for number 9. We have finally completed the numbers on the birth chart. I hope you've actually enjoyed this series. Next week, we will start looking at arrows on the birth chart. I won't know until I get started how many variations I'll be able to look at, so I won't know or be able to tell you until later how many videos it's going to be. I'll try and keep each video to about 20-25 minutes, so it's not too long for you, but there's quite a few combinations that we can read on the chart. In the meantime, I will say have a wonderful day. Thanks for being part of my journey. Take care. See you on the next video. Bye bye for now.